At 3:48 a.m. in Crimea, a Russian team gently removes a $2 million 48N6 missile from a transport truck. For weeks, Ukraine has been draining the S-400 batteries of their munitions. This vital replenishment, delivered beneath a dense, pre-dawn mist, is the bloodstream they urgently require. They feel secure, they feel unseen. They have no clue that 30 feet above the Black Sea, a 10-pound killer sits 78 seconds away from turning their cherished asset into an enormous fireball of twisted steel. The architect is a Ukrainian Lacher 100 drone, a patient predator that observed these identical trucks crawling out of a depot inside Crimea. It watched them wait for the fog, convinced it offered cover. The conveyance for this mission is a Magura V5, an 18-foot robotic boat that slipped past Russian naval pickets carrying 3 Wild Hornet FPV drones. The entire operation costs roughly $280,000. Russia is about to incur more than $12 million in lessons on asymmetric warfare. On paper, Russia controls this ground. Their Podlet K1 radar should detect anything within 25 miles. Their Panzer S-1 missile batteries are the sentries prepared to tear apart anything that moves. Their Kasuka 4 jammer is intended to make the skies an electronic null. But Ukraine refuses to play by those rules. They are not striking the fortress directly. They are targeting the delivery courier at the rear gate. The objective is not merely to degrade a radar, it is to wound Russia's ability to resupply, to demonstrate that any attempt to reinforce this bleeding stronghold will face a swift, savage, and embarrassingly inexpensive retaliation. The Russians assumed the fog would conceal their convoy. They're about to discover it was the hunter's ideal veil. At 3:52 a.m., the Magura V5, having traversed over 100 miles from a clandestine inlet near Odessa, kills its main engine. It now rests just 15 meters offshore, a grey phantom in the pre-dawn haze. A signal flashes through the Starlink feed from the Lacher 100. A ghost in the clouds miles above the target goes silent. Resupply underway. The 10-minute window begins to narrow. With a few keystrokes, the operator unleashes havoc. Compressed air launches all 3 Wild Hornets from the rail in rapid sequence. They steady immediately, then plunge, skimming the waves at an astonishing 30 feet. They become flying specters, physically concealed beneath the Podlet radar's horizon by the Earth's curvature. It sounds straightforward. The catch is, you don't need visual contact to destroy a drone. Russia's Kasuka 4 electronic warfare suite generates a 50-mile bubble of jamming, so fierce it can render a drone's receiver useless in static. But the Ukrainians anticipated this. The drones do not depend on a basic radio link. They employ a military-grade frequency-hopping protocol that shifts channels 500 times per second across a broad spectrum. It's like trying to strike a single mole in a whack-a-mole machine where the mole teleports between 1,000 holes each second. The Russians have adapted with broad-spectrum noise as well, yet despite their countermeasures, gaps remain in doctrine, maintenance, and imagination. Vulnerabilities that a determined, low-cost foe can exploit repeatedly until the cost of occupation outweighs any perceived gain. So Ukraine added one last, lethal layer. Once the operator transmits the final impact coordinates, the drones flip to a fully autonomous AI terminal guidance mode. The craft severs its link to the operator entirely, relying on onboard sensors to navigate the closing miles and deliver the strike independently. You cannot jam a drone that has stopped listening. At 3:54 a.m., the 2-minute dash to the objective commences. The Magura V5, its role complete, peels away and begins a quiet 100-mile withdrawal back toward Odessa. The Hornets are now autonomous, 3 smart projectiles streaking toward their mark. They carry a strategy to defeat visual watchers and a plan to defeat the electronic spectre. But what happens when they run into the guard dog? At 3:56, a single, fleeting blip flickers on the Podlet K1 radar display. It appears for less than a second at roughly 200 feet, then vanishes. The Russian operator, Sergei, snaps upright. His suite is tuned to persistent tracks, not ephemeral phantoms. He follows procedure, trying to reacquire the ghost's last known vector. Nothing. The contact has disappeared. He has just observed the opening gambit of Ukraine's lethal chess match. The lead Wild Hornet's AI intentionally rode briefly into the radar's aperture before dropping back to 30 feet. Why? To prove the radar was live, and to wave. Sergei swears and shifts to the Panzer's optical and thermal sensors, slewing the high-end cameras toward the vanished bearing. Now he's hunting, eyes sweeping the grainy, fog-smeared tableau on the monitor. And therein lies the trouble. His multi-million-dollar thermal imager is built to lock onto the incandescent plume of a fighter engine. A 10-pound battery-powered drone emits less heat than a rabbit. It vanishes in the background hiss. He sees nothing. He hears nothing. His displays insist the sky is empty. Meanwhile, out in the dark, 3 intelligent projectiles are closing from under a mile out. He's a watchdog, barking at air. At 3:57 a.m., suddenly, 2 brand-new contacts explode onto Sergei's screen. These are no specters. They are large, distinct, and racing at about 300 feet. The system classifies them as possible Bayraktar-class drones. He achieves an immediate fire solution. With a flick, 2 57E6 missiles thunder off their rails. $4 million of Russian vengeance screaming into the mist. Moments later, the thermal camera shows 2 bright flares. Targets obliterated. Adrenaline and pride surge through him, but he hasn't downed 2 Bayraktars. He has vaporized empty air. This is the essence of the Whisper Sting ruse, a cunning piece of theater. High above, the Leica 100 is not merely watching, it's conducting. It fed the exact bearing and position of the Panzer's radar into the Hornet's Cortizia AI. The AI then ordered the first 2 drones to perform a deceptive climb, briefly rising to 300 feet while switching on a tiny electronic amplifier. That gadget made their minute 0.05 meters radar footprints bloat into signatures 10 times larger, perfectly impersonating a far more substantial threat. It's an old magic trick, brilliantly applied. Make the crowd watch your right hand flourish a gaudy cape while your left hand is already riffling through their pockets, while Sergei is glued to his monitors, congratulating himself for downing 2 apparitions. The third Wild Hornet, the true assassin, has slipped cleanly past his defenses unseen. It now has an unobstructed, undefended corridor straight into the core of the Russian network. At 3:58 a.m., the ruse played out exactly as planned on the Ukrainian operator's display. The vector to the Podlet radar lies open and direct. The 2 decoys purchased a perfect window, but an unforeseen complication arises. The twin Panzer intercepts detonated, producing a short-lived, intense plume of hot gas and fragments that hung over the shore, temporarily fouling the Hornet's infrared sensors. That thermal haze is now blowing directly across the third Hornet's flight path, saturating and blinding its IR eyes at the most crucial instant. The simple strike just transformed into a run through a maelstrom of heat and sensor clutter. Back in the command vehicle, Sergei's swagger curdles into stark apprehension. 2 textbook kills, yet the engagement feels wrong, suspiciously effortless. His commander agrees. An order crackles through the network. Push Kasuka 4 to full power. Pinpoint the origin. The air fills with invisible interference. At the same moment, a Catron Hunter interceptor lifts off from a nearby pad, its camera slave to Kasuka's direction finder, and tasked to hunt down whatever phantom provoked the alarm. At 3:59, the Ukrainians reach their moment. From high above, the Leica 100 catalogues everything: the blinding thermal plume, the Kasuka's energy surge, the Catron's launch. It sends one pre-planned instruction. Miles away, on the deck of the retreating Magura V5, a final system wheezes into life. A 20-pound fog generator begins expelling a dense ribbon of artificial mist, pouring white into the existing dawn haze. Tactically, it's flawless. The cool, viscous fog rapidly disperses the hot thermal cloud from the missile bursts, restoring clarity to the Third Hornet's infrared seeker. At the same time, it lays down a 5mm thick wall of opaque vapor, preventing the Catron and Sergei's remaining sensors from acquiring a reliable lock. Russia believed it was battling a drone. Instead, it discovers it's up against the weather itself. At 4 a.m., the Hornet's camera, previously a tableau of thermal interference, snaps into razor-sharp focus. The engineered fog has worked like a fire extinguisher on the blinding heat of the explosions. The corridor is clear, yet the mission has become exponentially more perilous. From the Leica 100's broad vantage, the Russian convoy is no longer orderly. Panic has set in. The trucks hauling the fresh S-400 rounds lumber off in erratic directions at roughly 10 miles per hour, a clumsy attempt to disperse and create multiple targets. Inside the Panzer vehicle, Sergei is now functionally blind, and that makes him unpredictable. He fires again from reflex. Two more $100,000 interceptors spit into the impenetrable wall of white fog, hunting phantoms and echoes. In a last desperate gamble, a command flashes: "Bring Nebo M online." The massive long-range radar begins its slow, methodical spin-up, a final throw of the dice. The catch? It requires minutes to reach effectiveness, and even then its skyward focus is of little use against a menace that's already behind the perimeter. The Ukrainian operator's pulse races at 120 beats per minute. He juggles multiple feeds: the Hornet pilot's feed, the Leica's God's Eye view, and the shifting positions of the convoy. The LAA's laser designator paints a tiny, invisible dot on the tarpaulin roof of the lead truck, the one carrying 4 brand-new $2 million S-400 missiles. The AI awaits a terminal command. He gives it. "Lock onto target 1. Kortitsia's AI assumes command, instantly ingesting the laser feed from the Leica. It disregards the frantic Panzer salvos and the other scattering trucks. Its sole objective: convert $8 million worth of Russian hardware into an inferno. 10 seconds to impact. The Hornet's control surfaces make minute corrections. Solve 5 seconds. The camera tightens, and the cylindrical silhouettes of missiles beneath the tarp become nearly discernible. 3 seconds. The truck driver, still shouting into his radio and convinced he's evading, remains oblivious to the 10-pound angel of death screaming toward his load. At 4:01 a.m., impact. The 3-pound PG-9B-shaped charge performs exactly as engineered. It doesn't merely detonate, it channels its force into a single, white-hot jet of molten copper